Aloha and welcome to today's webinar, Unraveling the Mysteries of the IRB. My name is Kristen Connors and I'm the Fellowship, Scholarships, and Professional Development Coordinator in Graduate Division. I'll be your moderator today. In today's webinar, we'll hear from Kristen Bacon, Manager at the University of Hawaii's Human Studies Program. Kristen will be providing background and an overview of human subjects research and the IRBE protocol process at the university. We'll be sure to save time and space for any questions. Please feel free to type them in the Q&A box as we go along, and I'll get to as many as possible. I'd now like to turn things over to our presenter, Kristen Bacon.
Mahalo nui, Kristen. It's so fun to be a fellow Kristen with you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Aloha kako, everyone. It's great to be here in cyberspace with you. My name is Kristen Elizabeth Kau'i Onalani Bacon. I'm a Master of Public Health, a certified IRB professional, one of 3 in Hawaii. I am the manager of the UH Human Studies program, and I have been working in the field of human subjects research protection since 2006. I'm also a PhD student in public health here at UH Manoa, a Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Fellow and trained Palina Circle co-facilitator here at the UH system. I am an artist, and I am delighted to be with you. Let's see if I can get this to move forward. All right, our agenda. I want to provide you with contact information. I want to talk about safely conducting in-person research, research ethics evolution, how to know when it's human subjects research, and if it is, how to submit an application successfully. We have 4 core people in our program. We are a system office. I am the manager, and we've all worked together for over 20 years. So we probably have come across your desk if you've written us an email or given us a call or come in. We are here to help and coordinate your application. Our website offers everything that I'm going to talk about. So please take advantage of that. I believe these slides will be available to you after this presentation, maybe in a couple of days. We are located in the basement of Sinclair, which is under construction. So yes, you're right. It does not look like there should be anybody here. Please contact us via phone or email address. That's probably the best way to reach us. Our website offers numerous links and documents and templates, and we really want you to feel free to go ahead and take advantage of that. Our program offers a free review service and support to our researchers throughout the UH system. Anyone who is a UH affiliate, that can be faculty, students, personnel, can be a PI on our application system. Our purpose is to protect the dignity, the health, the welfare, the rights of anyone, anywhere, who volunteers for UH research. Those people, those volunteers, are referred to most frequently as participants. Our office supports 3 institutional review boards, which is what IRB stands for, and we'll tell you more about them. We serve all 10 campuses, so everywhere where UH is, we serve. The Institutional Review Board is made up of wonderful people who mostly volunteer to, recently I'm saying mostly because there was a beautiful program for those who wished to receive very small but very appreciated compensation for their service. But all these years volunteer before this, they are independent, which means that their decision-making process is not influenced by anyone, but their own knowledge and skills and experience serving as an institutional review board member. The federal government, which is our overarching guidance for how we protect participants, states that the Institutional Review Board should model the actual participant population. So we have people who are skilled in understanding what research is, who are able to view things from a scientific perspective, and we also have people who they're called non-scientists, who are not trained in the field of science in any way and are not trained to conduct research, and they come and serve as the perspective most specifically of participants without that kind of training. So we want to make sure we have a balanced and well-represented population in our institutional review board so that everyone in all potential participants as much as possible are represented. The institutional review board in our office, as I said, represents how to review any research conducted by a UH affiliate. So what's happening now when it comes to conducting research safely? The pandemic has not been declared over, surprisingly enough. And the pandemic raised awareness a lot about respiratory disease transmission. So our institutional review board has determined that if research is to take place in person, we want our researchers to not be transmitting or causing an increase of risk in our participant population. So we require a safety plan. The safety plan guidelines are found on our website. If you plan to conduct in-person research, please look at the guidelines. We're asking you to include in your application submission your safety plan, how you plan to conduct your research safely if being conducted in person, and most specifically, what the IRB members are looking for is that the researchers will wear well-fitting masks that cover nose and mouth during the interaction. So why do we have so many rules and regulations that we follow? That's a question we get often. And the reason why, unfortunately, is that people were harmed in the name of research, and we call that an ethical violation. So you'll see that everything that we do is inspired by these ethical violations that have occurred in history. For example, no consent process, or a misleading consent, or an incomplete consent. And how did we respond to that? We have a super detailed, very informative consent process that involves a consent form. Please see our consent form templates found on our website. There have been times that researchers misrepresented themselves. What does that mean? It means that they were not upfront about being a researcher, and they collected information about people without letting them know they were actually participants. That's the third bullet. Participants were not informed. So how do we address those two things? In the consent form. So the consent form is super clear now. It says, I am talking to you right now and inviting you to participate in my research project because I am a researcher and I would like to do this research, right? And that people are being informed, they're participants in the consent process by being asked to agree or not agree to being a participant. So that is very clear upfront in the consent process. There has been a lack of sound scientific design, and why this matters is if research is conducted that is not sound, then the results are not sound, and we consider that a risk for participants that they've wasted their time. And we don't want that. We don't want anyone to participate without good cause. So we want to be sure that there is good scientific design, and we'll look for that in your application. Unfortunately, also, participants have been treated as property, and vulnerable populations have been targeted, and I'll go over that in more detail. So what do we do now? You guessed it right, the consent process, right? The consent form. We make very sure that people understand that the voluntary nature of their participation is protected throughout their participation. It's not a contract that you sign and then you have to do something. You literally can stop participating at any time. You're not the property. Even if your researcher is also your teacher in your class and you have a grade that you're getting from them, there's still protections in place to make sure that you are free to volunteer your participation or not. And we have extra protections in place for vulnerable populations. We trace a lot of our policies and procedures back to the Nuremberg Code, which was the first time that the Europeans and Americans realized, wait a minute, we don't really have a written document that's being followed, agreed upon, and followed. And this was during the Nuremberg trials that happened right after World War II. And this photo is some Nazi war criminals who did very many bad things and were on trial. And all of a sudden, the Americans and Europeans said, hey, wait a minute, we need a code. We need something written down to tell us what is okay and what is not okay in human subjects research. So even though all of these things are no-brainers really, right? They were all horribly violated by what happened to people in medical experimentation or was considered medical torture during World War II. So all of these things are now addressed in the consent process, in the way that we review our applications. Another way to understand how we protect our participants is the special care that we pay to different communities who may need special protections because unfortunately some communities have been targeted for whether it's their genetic makeup or their location for research. The Havasupai tribe is an example of that. And in 1989, some researchers at Arizona State University had a very reasonable approach at first and they worked with the tribe, so a community-based approach, and it was good to look at the predisposition that the tribe may have had genetically to type 2 diabetes. So all of that was fine, and it started fine, but there was no correlation found, and that's when the research should have stopped. The violations began when other researchers were allowed access to that material and to that data, and they conducted research that was unknown to the tribe and would not have been approved by the tribe. And it wasn't until a tribal member attended a lecture did they realize that this kind of violation, it's not just an ethical violation, of course, it's an emotional violation. It could even be considered a spiritual violation. So it's a tremendous break of trust. And even though there were reparations and the samples were returned, that break of trust can be passed down and is passed down through generations. And that is a real problem because I believe the purpose of research is to improve the world for all of us. And if a whole community decides that they're not going to trust and cannot trust researchers, then they also are missing out, and we're missing out. They're missing out on anything that could be discovered that could help them, and we're missing out on learning more about them and about the world. So let's make a pact this very moment, my fellow researchers, that we will protect trust with our participants and with each other, even as researchers, that we will not do this kind of thing in how we conduct our research, that we will actually work respectfully with our communities and with our participants. Thank you for agreeing with me. Bringing the ethical violation story home to Hawaii, we did have very bad examples in Kalaupapa, Molokai, for example, where the Hansen's disease colony was created to address the high rate of transmission that was occurring. It was the first time in I read once that in history that isolation was a choice for disease control. And this was a decision made by Hawaiian royalty at the time to try to keep this disease under control and at bay. It was a very horrible and difficult decision to have to make. And unfortunately, it made this population very vulnerable to ethical violations when it comes to research, not only with Hansen's disease research, but also other diseases that were being studied at the time and were also rampant and really seriously affecting the whole community, not only here in Hawaii, but also the continent. So syphilis was intentionally injected, for example, into 6 girls to see the natural history of the disease, the progression of the disease. And this is what we've seen often in ethical violation stories where human beings are considered a throwaway population, whether they're institutionalized or in the prison system and subject to research, whether they like it or not. And that's what this office is here to prevent from happening. In a more recent issue, we had the Native Hawaiian genome patent, which was proposed and vociferously rejected by our Hawaiian community, but not until there was this break of trust again. So UH is really working hard to reestablish a trusting relationship with our Hawaiian community in every way, and also through communication and clarity. And even though there was a apology from UH researchers for this proposed patenting of genomes, it still was a break of trust. And I'm working personally hard to improve that and help that as best I can. So, changing topics, thanks for sticking with me through the hard stories. What is human subjects research? If you're a researcher and you're wondering if you need to submit an application, that's going to be one of your first questions, right? What is that? Why do I have to do this? So if you're getting data, if you're interacting with people who are alive, so this is the point where I can make a joke, especially because we just went through Halloween, yeah? So the person, do they have a heartbeat? Are they breathing? So no zombies, robots, vampires, who else doesn't have a heartbeat? You know what I mean? So if someone's breathing, has a heartbeat, it's very likely that they are a human subject if you're going to get data from them, or if you're going to work with identifiable data or biospecimens. And all of this is found in Title 45 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 46. And that's the only time I'm going to give you the magical codes. We have lots of magical codes that we work with, but right now that's the source code. If you ever want to go look up all our stuff, it's there. So what is interaction? Interaction is, are you asking people questions? Survey or questionnaire, interview, focus group. And it could also be observation in a setting where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. Intervention is you plan to see if what you are doing will make a change. So it could be curriculum change in the case of education research. It could be behavioral change in the case of psychological research, psychology research. It could be biomedical change in the case of drugs or devices for bio research. So think about it. Am I wanting to see if what I'm doing in my research question, right? In my research question, inspiring me to make a change in somebody, then that is intervention. And you can tell because you have pre and post in the social research world, right? You want to pre-survey, do your thing, post survey, you want to see if there's a change. We also care deeply, as does the whole university system, about identifiable private information. So if you are a researcher and you would like to collect some of this material, please think again. So don't ever collect social. Remember back in the day, if you've been around, everything was under the social. It's no longer that way. So do not collect the social security number. If for some reason you must, then please connect with data governance who will help you do that the right way. But in most cases, what you'll do is create a code yourself. Do not use social. If you wish to know the age of your participants, that's very common and fine. But we suggest that you just ask what year they were born or what age they are. rather than the day, month, year, because the day, month, year is private identifiable information and increases risk. Social and student ID are thought of in the same kind of way. So please use other, if you need to link a pre and post or a survey to an interview or whatever, create your own code. At UH, we follow the wisdom and guidance of our beloved Board of Regents who creates our policy. And they said, no student can be a PI on their own research. So we ask that you, if you're a student, get the help of a Board of Regents appointed person, and that's most of us here who are employed at UH, to be your PI on your e-protocol application. And then as a student, you will be a co-investigator. So no student, because of insurance and liability reasons, can be a PI on their own research. When we have such a project, we call it a student-led project. It still has that person as PI and the student as co-investigator. But we expect and hope that the person in the PI line, a PI box, will effectively train and mentor students in how to conduct research effectively, and how to take care of their participants, be the PI for insurance and liability reasons. And before the application is submitted, we expect that they will review the application, check it for completeness, check it for typographical errors, make sure that application is gorgeous. And so when it's received by us, it's ready to go. For any researcher, this is co-investigators as well as primary or principal investigators, we ask and demand that you get approval before even contacting potential participants in a recruitment process. Our job is to review everything before potential participant contact. And the only way we can do that is if you submit everything in an application process. Once we've reviewed it and determined it's safe according to all these risk measures that we must use, then you can get your approval from us, your official approval letter, and you can go ahead and start your research, start your recruitment, all the things. So please know that approval happens first. We are not able to give approval after the fact. So go ahead and use our consent and assent forms. What is an assent form? People who are 17 years of age and younger are considered minors, and they are not legally allowed to consent themselves to participate in research, to have a consent process. So they assent and their parent guardian consents for them to participate, and that's all in our templates. So please check out our templates. If you have approval and you would like to make a substantive change, then please submit a modification application, which is also available to you in eProtocol, and let us know your proposed change that you would like to make. Give us a description if you have any changes, like you want to add people or take people off in terms of key personnel, then please make sure you include their names in your modification application, how they qualify for this new, if they're being added, how they qualify, why they are going to be added, what they're going to do, and upload their required CITI, which I will get into in a minute. If you are finished with your project, please close it. So please submit a final report when your project is finished. If you are analyzing de-identified data, you can also close it at that point, even if you're still analyzing and publishing and presenting. If your data is de-identified, you can close it with us via the final report. Once you close it, please store it for 3 years. What do you store? You store a written summary of your research, what you found, your informed consent if your consent forms have signatures or any other type of confirmation that someone's participating. And check with if you have the benefit of sponsorship, of funding, check with your sponsor because they may require an even longer storage period. We expect our researchers to promptly report unanticipated problems. What does promptly mean? Within 24 hours, we have our email address that we'd ask that you submit to and let us know of any unanticipated problems. What's an unanticipated problem? It even could be COVID, right? We've had a few where somebody participated and then was tested positive for COVID. So anything that's not anticipated in your risk list, let us know. Of course, we expect you to conduct your research ethically. We ask that if your participants are trying to reach you, that you respond promptly. You'll maintain privacy and confidentiality. What does that mean? So if somebody reveals something in the course of the interview that you don't go and, talk to your research team who then tells their auntie and their uncle, and then that person hears about it later, that their story that they told during your research interview got out there, you keep it private. If there are any changes to risks or benefits, you let your participants know. Oftentimes, things are learned as you go in research. And so sometimes you may not know something and then realize something. Of course, cultural sensitivity. So we ask our researchers to understand who you're working with and what's important to them, and that you'll be respectful and part of that, hold that part in your heart of what to do with that community, and that you'll design the research appropriate to the setting. So what does that mean? So let's say you're going somewhere, and in that place, signing a consent form would be a real taboo, a real problem, and it would cause great concern. So you could write to us in your application and say that you're requesting a waiver of documentation of consent because this community is not comfortable signing the consent form. That's making your research appropriate to the setting. So what have we covered so far? It's a lot, yeah, I know. And to pace yourself, take a breath. Whew, what's human subjects research? Somebody is alive and breathing, has a heartbeat. Check. You're interacting, intervening, or working with identifiable information. Check. Okay, so we got all that covered. What about if you're a student and you have to do this research for your dissertation or your thesis? Yes, you're going to need IRB approval before you do that. What if it's funded? In many cases, you need IRB approval before the funding will be released to you. And anytime something's going to be made public. And why all this? Because part of the definition of research from the federal perspective is that the data will be generalizable. It means that your data that you gather for your research could be applicable to a community elsewhere. And how is that happening? Through publication, through presentation, through online, through any way you can imagine that something that your beautiful data gets out there that's public in any way, then that makes it qualify. So, okay, yes, that does require IRB approval. What? Prior? Yes. Before? Yes. What is it? The big message, the big takeaway? Make sure you have IRB approval before you begin the project. We cannot give it after, and that's a fact. So sadly, we do have it sometimes when we encounter a situation where there was no IRB approval in a consistent and persistent way. Most researchers really do want to work with us and really do want to do this. So we do have superpowers as an IRB authority granted to us by the federal government, which allows us to suspend or terminate a project if there is any potential for participant harm. We can seize and destroy data. I've seen that happen. And we can also halt the funding if there's any potential for harm. If you're a student, and hear me, students, please hear me, because I've seen this happen 3 times, and I never want to see it happen again. Get approval before you conduct your research, because you will not be allowed to graduate. And that's awful for everybody, especially you. So our dear graduate division makes sure that if you say you conducted human subjects research, they are going to look for your approval letter. And if you don't have it, you're not going to graduate. Yeah. So make sure you please, please, please get approval. So what about those things that do not require IRB approval? Now, you may be surprised, but there are some things that do not require IRB approval. And it's because over the years, the federal government has come to understand that there are a great many things that look and smell and taste just like research, but do not necessarily mean there are human subjects research requiring IRB approval in advance. For example, if the project is just for a class grade, and you can imagine this, once the grades are in, the data turns to ash and blows away in the wind. You never see it again. Nobody ever does anything with that data again. Then it does not require IRB approval. If the data is something that you found freely online, totally public, or at the library, or any other way that's public, does not require IRB approval. If you are a beneficiary of secondary data that has been de-identified, you do not need IRB approval. If you are conducting a project where the intention, and I like to imagine it's like a sphere, like a crystal ball, where the intention is to keep the data inside that sphere. So it's an evaluation, it's assessment, it's an internal process. I'm conducting all these things that look just like human subjects research, but the purpose is to provide that result back to improve a system, a program, or whatever. That's an internal thing and also not research. Officially, you do not need anything to do. You can just do nothing with IRB. However, we deeply, thoroughly, especially if you're a student, so please hear me, apply in our e-protocol application for what's called not human subjects research under application type. If you're any of these things, because as a student, you're going to have many instances where people are going to ask you, well, did you check with the IRB? And I promise you, having a paper from our office, having a document from our office that says, yes, we looked at this, it's not human subjects research, here you go, is a much stronger argument for you than just telling them your opinion. I promise. So if you're a student, we highly, deeply, truly recommend from our hearts, please, please get your statement from us. Go ahead and fill out the e-protocol application. You're still going to need someone else to be your PI, not human subjects research. And I'll get into this again, but if you are conducting not human subjects research, you're welcome to use our consent form templates. If you need a consent form, we always recommend the consent process. It's just an ethical principle, regardless of what you're doing. But we just will need you to take out any mention of research, even participants. It's a project, they're volunteers, no mention of IRB, no mention of human studies program. This is not going to have IRB oversight. So don't confuse anybody by having our template with that information in it. Just take it all out. You can use it because it has a very good basic structure when it comes to the ethical principles, but not human subjects research. Please submit that application. So if we've gone through all of these points, right? It's a living human being interaction intervention identifiable. The intention is public dissemination somehow. Whew, time to submit an application, get IRB approval before conducting the research. Yes, yes. So we recommend you take care of your required training first. Yes, there is a required training, and our office made the determination that we would choose a training that is free to you. Yay! So go to our website, click on the training link. This link for CITI will be there, and log in via your institution. It's much easier. It'll help you get right in. You're going to use your username and password like you do for everything else. You'll add a course, and the human subjects research course includes information privacy and security. So the result will be 2 certificates of completion. So everyone in your project, everyone considered key personnel, will need to take the CITI training, have 2 certificates of completion. And who are key personnel? Who are key personnel? You wonder, you may want to know. So our view is anyone who will have interaction with participants for the purpose of data collection or the consent process, anyone who will analyze identifiable data or biospecimens. Any of those types of people, key personnel. They should be listed on the personnel page of the application, and we should see their CITI. If you're collaborating with people who are from elsewhere and are not in the UH system, eProtocol is hooked into the database of UH. So only people who have hawaii.edu email addresses can be listed on the personnel page. So please include those people who are not hawaii.edu people on the summary page. Give us their name, why they qualify to be a key personnel, what they're going to be doing, and include their CITI training. So we're going to do 2 certificates of completion. And this is the first level of review when we receive an application. So that's why I'm asking you to take care of it first, because you'll get the application sent back to you so it's good for 3 years. So if your training has expired, if you're missing one of the certificates, it's going to be both of those certificates. Now, what level of training you want to know, because it'll ask. Now, I recommend for everyone do the non-exempt social and behavioral sciences researchers and key personnel for the social research, the non-exempt biomedical for the biomedical research. And the reason why I recommend that, even though it takes longer, is those certificates will cover both exempt and non-exempt applications. If you do only the exempt, and we determine that your project actually qualifies as a non-exempt project, meaning the risk is potentially higher, then you're going to have to go back in and retake the CITI. So just do the non-exempt, you're covered, everything's good for 3 years, and you're taken care of. Then once you get your CITI done, eProtocol, yay! Our online application system. And the reason why there's so much celebration around this online application system is before, when I started, everything was paper. Not just that, multiple copies of paper, piles and piles, and 50 filing cabinets and 2 copy machines. And oh my gosh, can you imagine having to walk over here and give us your application? So we love online. Go to our website. We have tutorials about how to use it. There's a user's manual. The key to know is eProtocol, which is the company KeyUSA eProtocol. They have a requirement that you have to disable your pop-up blocker for this website, for eProtocol. And that's because eProtocol uses pop-ups all the time. So the very first thing it'll look for is, do you have your pop-up blocker disabled for eProtocol? And make sure you do that. Then you log in, same way, UH username and password, and choose. So there's a couple ways of going in. This is the way I recommend. Choose create protocol. It then creates a number. That's your special number for your application. The first 4 digits will be the year in which you created this application. The last 5 digits is eProtocol generated. when you write us an email and you say, hey, what's up with my application? Give us that number. That's the number that'll really help us find it. That's your special application number. So just put in the number and then get into the main application. You can see there's another page that pops up that asks for the title and everything. I just say, just go on in, hit save, and then start entering in your information. It's just easier that way. What is the right time to submit an application? The e-protocol application is not for when you have a design concept or a research idea or a notion or a dream. The e-protocol application is for when you are ready. It's prime time. You have your consent form template that you converted to your project. You have your questions. If you say in your application, I'm going to conduct an interview, then we're going to go look for your interview questions. If you say in your application, I want to conduct focus groups, then we're going to look for your focus group plan, your questions. We want to see your recruitment materials. We want to see everything. If you're working with a population who doesn't speak English, then we want to see everything translated as well. So in English, as well as all the translated materials. And let me tell you this thing too about recruitment. When you create your recruitment flyer, we do have a template you can look at on our website or any other recruitment material. If you have compensation, do not describe it in monetary terms. The IRB asks that you say compensation will be given for participation and time spent. Do not put dollar signs and monetary amounts. The other thing to think about with recruitment is it's not for completion. That gives the feeling that it's not voluntary. So you're going to say the participation is for time spent, right? You don't want to give the impression that you're only giving compensation if somebody completes their participation or finishes. Don't use those words, because then we'll send it back and ask you to change it. So we require that you use our consent form templates. So even if you have a successful template or successful consent form that was approved in the past, go back to our website and grab one of the templates, please, because we're always updating and adding. The most recent thing is a new paragraph about in-person research and mask wearing. So please use our consent form template. If you don't, we're going to ask you to go ahead and get back there and use them. So if you're a student researcher, what do? Well, you got to find that wonderful PI person and make sure they're comfortable. Don't put somebody in as a PI without letting them know. Yes, it has happened. So make sure you actually have approval from get consent from your PI to be your PI, please. Make sure their CITI is up to date and that they know to go in and look at the application when you are ready to submit. And there is an obligations page where they're supposed to say, yes, I did look at this application and it's ready to go. So make sure you inform your PIs of that. If you have approval and you would like to make a substantive change, please submit a modification application. They are shorter, fortunately, than the longer initial application. And we want you to put all the information right there in the modification application page. So we want to make sure that everything is super clear. What we like to do is copy paste whatever you put in the modification application box into your approval letter. So write to us as if you're wanting it to appear in your approval letter. This is what was approved. When you have an online survey, we offer an online consent form template. That is what's different is that it has a statement which says print or save this form for your records. We always want participants to hold on to that consent form. And going to the first page of the survey implies consent. So there's no signature, right, in an online survey process. So make sure that they know that the action of going to the first page is like signing. So many questions come to us, is my project exempt, expedited, or full? So first of all, let me apologize on behalf of the federal government for using such confusing words. So exempt doesn't mean that you don't have to submit an application. Exempt means that it's not going to go to full board for review, but it definitely needs to be submitted as an application and we still need to look at it. Expedited doesn't mean that it's the fastest route. It just means it's not going to full board. I don't know where, I still have to find out why it's called expedited. So one way that so as you know, our job every day is to figure out whether a project is exempt, expedited, or full. And then it goes in each different track. So one way that we use to figure out which is the audio recording, video recording, or photo taking. So if somebody plans to audio record an interview, for example, where the subject matter is low risk and the purpose is for transcription, then that could qualify as exempt for exempt review. If that audio recording, however, is going to be posted in an online resource or added to an archive for public access, then that would no longer qualify as exempt. Now, why? Because it could be listened to over and over. There's a greater risk of identifying participants, and that increase of risk moves it to expedited review. So what if someone wants to video record just for the purpose of transcription? They just want to look at what's going on with the face, and they're going to destroy the transcription. They're going to destroy the recording once the transcription is recorded. Then that could qualify for exempt review, even as a video recording. If they tell us they're not going to post the video, it's not going to be used at conferences, it's just for the researcher to take a look at how someone's speaking, their gestures, their facial expressions, and the subject matter is low risk. So that could. But in most cases, if it's video recording or photo taking, it will not qualify for exempt review and it must be reviewed as non-exempt. Or if the subject matter is higher risk or you're working with a vulnerable population, then it would go to full board for review. So hopefully that helps you kind of figure out which is which, if you're using photographs or audio recording or video recording. If you want to do any of that, please include in the consent form why. Why do you want to do this? Add a yes and no checkbox on the signature page for each thing and describe what will happen to the recording or to the photograph at the completion of the project. We don't want to see your research material appearing on YouTube or becoming a montage for a documentary or any of those things if there's no consent for that. So be clear in your consent form. So we have these 3 levels of review that we just went through, yeah, and non-exempt. So now you know if you have a non-exempt project, please submit anyway, and we can help you have an official document from our office. This is not a non-exempt, excuse me, a non-human subjects research project. Oh, sorry, I just really confused everybody. Non-exempt is reviewed in the office. It's expedited or full. Not human subjects research, however, is not. It has no IRB oversight. Please submit anyway for not human subjects research. Definitely submit for non-exempt. Sorry about the confusion there. So submit and get your statement from us that your application is a not human subjects research application. For exempt, we consider risk as same as everyday life. There is no IRB oversight in the terms of going to the full board, but it has IRB oversight in terms of people who are trained to do this kind of review. We have no annual review for exempt applications, so please notify us when the project is complete using a final report and give us about 2 to 3 weeks if your application is complete for the review process. The most frequently seen categories for exempt, and there are more than these 4, are here. One is education research in a classroom setting a recognizable classroom setting where to the participants, the research looks the same as everyday classroom experience. So no one's singled out. Everyone experiences the research just the same as regular class. Category 2 is interaction. So surveys, interviews, focus groups, and observation. Category 3, intervention. So this is when you know you want to see if you're making a change. And category 4 is when you have identifiable secondary information or biospecimens. Category 4 is for data that's past, present, or future. Expedited is one of those non-exempt areas. Sorry for confusing you. Non-exempt is expedited and full. Expedite does not mean that the review happens more quickly. The risk is potentially higher. There are several categories, but typically for social research, we see category 7. We also typically do not have an annual review for expedited review applications, so please notify us when the project is complete. And it takes about 4 weeks to review if the application is complete. For full board, what goes to full board? So if the population is a vulnerable population, the subject matter is higher risk, you're asking people questions about illegal activities, for example, it will go to the full board. If it's a more complex study, it'll go to the full board. So check out our calendar. It's on our website. It shows you when applications are due and when the meetings happen. So applications are due typically 2 weeks prior to the meeting. And we would take those to the full board. Typically, those are not straight approves unless you work with us in advance to try to make sure your application is extremely perfect and ready. Or if you work with an IRB member in advance and we can arrange that, let us know. We want to make sure that your review process is good. But it's about a month turnaround, I would say, and there usually are revisions required, and then we'll go from there. So as I said earlier, we have 3 institutional review boards right now. We're in the process of saying a fond farewell to the cooperative IRB. The advent of single IRB and seating review has meant that we no longer need the cooperative IRB, which was formed before such developments. So we will be absorbing our cooperative into the biomedical IRB at the end of this year. So very, very grateful to all of the IRB members who have served over the years on the cooperative board, and we hope you'll continue with us in biomed. So full board projects include those projects of people who are considered vulnerable. So people who are in the incarceration system, and for those, we have a prisoner advocate who is present for those reviews. People who are 17 years of age and younger are also considered vulnerable because of the potential for coercion, for example. People with cognitive, mental, and/or emotional disabilities, who also could be influenced economically or educationally disadvantaged, and any other group. So IRB often considers Native Hawaiians, who are the subject of a lot of research. We want to make sure that there are extra protections in place, including evidence that researchers are working with a cultural expert to make sure their research is culturally aligned, this kind of thing. Now, if you are familiar with our world, then you know that pregnant women were considered vulnerable for a very long time. They are now considered just protected. They are no longer on the vulnerable list. And the reason why is because researchers just avoided conducting research with pregnant women. It just was too complicated. What that meant that pregnant women didn't have the benefit of research. So they've come to understand that pregnant women are not vulnerable, but they are still protected, and we still want to see if the research is considering that in the research design. So let's talk about not human subjects research again. So what is not human subjects research? In our beautiful system forever, we consider oral history human subjects research because we felt that even one story could possibly be generalizable. Now, with a revised common rule, which is the overarching rule that we IRB people follow, this was clearly defined. Oral history is now considered not human subjects research. So if you know you're going to conduct oral history, not human subjects research. Also journalism and so forth, all these things, not human subjects research. If it's an internal investigation, like I said, imagine the crystal ball, not human subjects research. If it's public health surveillance, and yes, that's going on, Red Hill, for example, not human subjects research. If it's for criminal justice or homeland security reasons, also not human subjects research. These are the beautiful oversight organizations that we follow. OHRP, of course, is the main federal one for projects that have drugs and devices. The Food and Drug Administration is also involved. There are policies and procedures that we follow in alignment with state of Hawaii, for example, legally authorized representative for research. If someone is incapacitated, you can appoint someone to be your legally authorized representative for research. We also have the great good fortune of accreditation from the Association for the Accreditation of Human Research Protected Programs, Inc., AHARP, who has been our accrediting body since 2017. They are the gold standard for accrediting human research protection programs, which is what we have here at the UH system internationally. And we just went through a successful reaccreditation. Whoop, whoop. My goodness sakes. And we're very fortunate to be able to offer this standard and gold star and beacon of light and so forth. We are the only AHARP accredited Institutional Review Board Human Subjects Protection Program in Hawaii and the Pacific region. And it demonstrates to the world that we are protecting our people in the best way and that our researchers are right up there in the top with the rest of the world, rest of the best. So what is the big takeaway? Get approval before starting your project, please. And now we're moving into the questions stage. And mahalo piha for your time and attention. Really appreciate you being here. And here are
Thank
some references.
Thank you so much, Kristen. We
Thank
do have a
you.
lot of questions.
Oh,
So,
yes.
okay, yeah, let me see if I can get them all and get them all correct. Okay, so the first question was for conducting online surveys
Mm-hmm.
and spreading those further via snowball collection method. Um,
Yes.
is it okay to ask participants if they would be willing to provide names and contact information of other possible participants, right? Because the snowball, right? Snowball
Yeah.
collection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
if it is clear that all personal identifiers collected will not be published along with the data collected in that survey. Does that does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I can tell you that, so I'm just wearing my administrator hat right now and not an IRB member hat. I'm also an IRB member. As an administrator, I can tell you what I have observed, which is the IRB is far more comfortable with researchers snowball sampling using a recruitment method where the participant has a flyer or an email or some kind of uh, communication that invites whoever to participate by going to a link or going to something that so what they would do is give the participant the recruitment material that that person can then send to whoever, hand to whoever, and then that person has the right to participate by going to the link, by going to the consent form, whatever that is, or an email address or whatever, so that because the IRB is uncomfortable with somebody collecting people's private identifiable information on behalf of a research project, and they're not actually key personnel, they're actually participants. So the best way to do it is to, this is what I've seen. Now, like I say, I'm just wearing the administrator hat, so you can submit anything and we will work with you. If you really, really want to do that method, then go ahead and submit that, and we will try to work with you to see what way the IRB will be most comfortable. But what I've seen working and recommended when such a thing has been proposed, and I've seen this proposed before, is to provide those participants with recruitment materials and links and say, okay, if you wish, we would love you to recruit your friends and family or whatever it is, your community members, here's the thing, have them contact us. And that is a protection in both directions. I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, let me know.
That was a great recommendation. Thank you so much, Kristen. Okay, next question. Do you recommend that researchers contact the IRB office before submitting their e-protocol application?
Yeah, absolutely. You're very welcome to send us an email. We actually can see draft applications before they're submitted. But if there are burning questions or concerns about any aspect of the application or about what we'd recommend, we highly recommend that you email us and let us know what you're wondering about. Um, the application is a smart form. And I know that that's an arguable statement, smart form, but anyway, it's a smart form. So depending on how you fill it out, it'll ask you to add or not add something. You'll see things that are blocked off, for example, if you fill that out in a certain way. I also want to let you know that if you're filling out the application and you're just about ready to submit, at the very last point, hit the button called Check for Completeness. And Check for Completeness will tell you what it is that you still need to do or if your application is complete. So that's another good way to make sure that you have filled out the entire form.
I just want to
Next.
vouch that they are all very helpful at the Human Studies program because I work with a number of grad students who have questions and they're not sure what they're supposed to be clicking or include, and especially if they need a letter verifying that they're conducting non-human subjects research as well. They've been all very helpful. So yes, reach out to them
Okay.
and ask for help.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, another question is, do you have an estimated timeline for the IRB review and approval process?
Yeah, so it depends on the application type, if it's exempt or non-exempt. For exempt review, give it, and it also really, really, really what it depends on is how beautiful the application is. Is it fully filled out? Does it have all the attachments or all the attachments using our templates? Does it have your safety plan? Does it have all that stuff? Your certificates of completion for CITI? If it's a complete, gorgeous application, that's the first step. Next step, exempt, 2 to 3 weeks, typically. Non-exempt for expedited review, give us another week because it goes to an IRB member for review. And if it's the monthly process, then it'll take about a month or two. So plan ahead. If you know that your subject matter is higher risk or you're working with vulnerable populations.
Got it. As graduate students, do we need to list our PI as key collaborators?
Well, that's a fascinating question. So your PI will be listed on the personnel page of the application as the PI of your project. And with that, then, is the assumption that they are key collaborators. They would also be listed on your consent form as the PI of your project. And with that is the expectation that they are key collaborators as well. So I'm not sure that I understand your question because it's kind of built in to what we see. So maybe if you have a different way of asking that question, try again, and I hope to be able to answer you.
Yeah. I'm not sure about this question, but they're asking what happens if I get funding after IRB is approved?
Great question. If you are you have the great good fortune of getting funding ever, but after you get IRB approval, please submit a modification application where you will change the funding page of your application to yes, I was funded. Give us the funding information, the name, the ORS number, all that magic. Yeah. So you would submit a modification application with a revised funding information.
Okay, this might also be related because it sounds like it's a modification. What is the process for changing a project name if IRB approval has already been granted and no protocols will be changed?
Yes. So a project name or a title of a project is considered a substantive change. So you would submit a modification application, and on the summary page of the application is where the title would change. You also would change the title on your consent documents and any other related documents. Sometimes people put the title on the recruitment materials. So if you change the title, you would also change it in those as well and upload the revised version, preferably with the date of the revision included in the title of the document.
Okay. This next question is kind of specific. So they submitted a Uniform Information Practices Act request for de-identified secondary data from the Department of Corrections. UIPA data is publicly available, and the data is secondary and de-identified. Would this IRB application be considered to be exempt, even if it is about vulnerable population, the incarcerated individuals?
Great question. So overall, the revised common rule determined that if data is secondary and de-identified, they allow it to be not human subjects research. So if I were them, I would submit it as a not human subjects research application explaining the source. Now, there is some variation on a theme. For example, if the data is sourced from medical records, we would want to make sure that HIPAA is in place and all that. But that still, if it's secondary, meaning you're not the person who collected the data, and it's de-identified, meaning you're not the person who took the identifiers off the data. So those two things happened with somebody else unrelated to your research project, and you've been given access to that data, then it will very likely still qualify as not human subjects research. I suggest submitting an application and giving us a chance to look at it. But even though the source data is a vulnerable population, those two things seem to be met.
If the research project, in this case, it's a student dissertation project,
Mhm.
includes interviews and classroom observation in multiple countries, do they submit a separate IRB for each country?
Uh, so this is a more complex answer. The first part is think about if you're a UH student and you're conducting this research for your dissertation or requirement for your degree, it would be one application to us, to the one e-protocol application via UHIRB. And then wherever you're going, they all may have different human subjects research protection policies and procedures. So as a researcher going to different places, you are responsible for understanding what is unique about each location. So you may find in one location that there is an institutional review board type process for the institution that you're working with and for the country that you're working with, or for the health oversight that you're working with. So you may find that you need to get multiple approvals to conduct this research at that place. And we're going to want to see that as well. If they require our approval before granting their approval, then you would make a statement in your application that you are in the process of getting approval from these other organizations and countries, and that you will submit them via a modification application once you receive them. If, however, you're going to a country that does not have any such research oversight, human subjects research protection oversight in place, then the statement of alignment with that population could come from a tribal leader, from a community head, from anyone who can vouch that the research who has like a leadership position in that community, anyone who can say, I have reviewed this application or reviewed this project, or, you know, Evie sat down with me and said, this is what I want to do, and I'm okay with it. They can reach my community, then communicate that as best you can. If it all depends on what is possible in the community where you're working, but if you could get a statement that's a consent form of some kind, or even an email or something that's a statement from that tribal leader saying, yes, this research can be conducted in this community, same thing, then you could either submit as a modification or include that as part of your original application. So as a researcher, it is a lot of extra work and time in each community, but you're required to do it. And it all depends on what is happening in that community. And we, as an IRB, expect you to know and to educate us, to communicate that to us in your application. Does that answer your question?
Hope so, yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Best of
we have,
wishes.
yeah, okay, two more questions. Are there special considerations for interviews conducted in a language not spoken by the researcher?
Yes. So the thing that I'm thinking about first is the consent process. Also, so the consent process, including the consent form, would need to be in the language of the participant. So that part happens first, and then the interview. And so if you, the best way, of course, is to have a translator. And our IRB does not require a paid professional translator. However, we would ask that as best as any researcher can, they don't use, their own child to translate, because such a relationship could cause undue stress, or may not be as reliable as someone who is a professional translator, or even a community member who could be a translator, just perhaps not the direct relative of the researcher. So there's some variation on that we've seen, where we want to make sure that whoever is translating, there's some distance from the researcher. And therefore, there's a greater sense that potentially the translation is accurate. Does that answer your question?
Um, I think so.
Okay.
Okay, and then last question that I see is, does the person have to wait until their committee, I'm assuming like a thesis or dissertation committee, has approved their proposal, or can they submit a draft to IRB beforehand?
That's a great question, because as students, we sometimes have to feel like we're waiting for eons to hear back. I know, yeah. So we always recommend that um, trust in the modification application process. So if you are as ready to go as you possibly can be, you've got all your drafts, you've got all your documents, you know your research questions, and you have it all together, we recommend going ahead and submitting, with the understanding that if your committee changes things, which it's most likely that they will, that you can and will submit that as a modification application before you actually begin the research. So we welcome you to come on in, come on down, submit, and then we'll go from there. Does that
Awesome.
answer your question? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I think that's it. I don't see any more questions in the
Okay.
Q&A.
Yay.
So yeah, so before people log off, I dropped a link for the eval from today's session if you wouldn't mind filling that out. But I do want to say mahalo to our presenter, Kristen Bacon from UH Human Studies program. And then if you have questions, again, you can reach out to their website. Everything's on there. I'm going to post that one more time so that you can click that link and bookmark it. So, but have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and best wishes with your research. Take care.
Thank you so much. Aloha.